play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. It is October 7th, 2019?
2019.
There you go. That's Dylan Burkhart, umhoops.com. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic. Another preseason pod. I feel like with every one, the anticipation is building, Dylan. I'm just goosebumps head to toe.
Less than 1 month until the
my gosh,
tip-off. We're almost there. Let's
go.
Can see the season from here.
Very exciting. We have a little mailbag episode today, so we'll be touching on Michigan State, Big Ten, maybe some national stuff, some recruiting. So we think this is something for everybody here. Real quick, though, before we hop into a bunch of questions that we have to get to, if you support this podcast, make sure you subscribe to The Athletic. I have a story coming today on new MSU commit A.J. Hoggard. Spoke to him, his father today, to kind of write some of the backstory of his commitment and the video that he put out there and some other things. So spoke to them today. He was at the airport, gave a good about 15 minutes or so, and then talked to his pops. He was a very entertaining guy, so that was all good. That's coming soon. Dylan, what do you have?
Did he have a next level commitment video?
It was a good one. It was a good one.
I'm always here for the creative commitment videos.
We'll get into it.
All right, I missed it. I'm missing out on all the excitement. We're just getting ready for the season over at Hoops. Lots of recruiting stuff, lots of preseason content. We're gonna have our annual over-unders post coming up soon, which is always a fun one where everyone throws in an over-under, and then I try to predict them and then look like an idiot at the end of the year.
Nice,
all sorts
perfect.
of fun stuff coming up.
Love it. All right. Well, so subscribe to The Athletic, subscribe to Hoops, subscribe to this podcast, and if you can, folks, leave us a review. That apparently helps people find this podcast. If you would be so generous to go in there, say a word or two about what we do, and if you like it, and if you don't like it, make sure you tweet at Dylan. That's at Hoops on Twitter. So that'll do the business portion of the episode. Let's get into the questions. You want to fire one off, Dylan?
Yeah, let's start with Hoggard, since that's the timely thing. We have two questions about how Michigan State balances 2 point guards in the same class with Jalen Terry and A.J. Hoggard. Does one have to move to the wing? Can you compare and contrast the playing styles of both? So you are apparently the expert here, so let's start with you.
That's not the case in any regard, but I think it's kind of a misguided question right off the bat. I look at it this way. First of all, there's no guarantee that either or both would be ready to play as a freshman, for one. And two, one is a 5'10", 160-pound, kind of hiccup quick point guard, one of these little kind of stealthy guys. Hoggard's got some more size. He's 6'3". If anything, he needs to kind of trim down probably and maybe get a little bit stronger and probably define his body a little bit. He looks like he's carrying probably maybe a touch of baby fat on him. So they're two. Are they both point guards? Yes. Are they two completely different point guards? Yes. But over top all of that, I don't see anything wrong with bringing in 2 point guards in the same class. You can play them together. You can play them separately. There's no guarantee both are going to be good. So have a contingency plan. And right now, if you look at the 2021 Michigan State roster, you would potentially have Foster Loyer as a junior, which, okay, is he ready to play substantial minutes and be your lead guard as a junior? I haven't seen evidence of that, so you need to plan accordingly. If you were to tell me that Foster Loyer's the starting point guard going into November 2020, I would kind of say, okay, I don't know about that. If you were to tell me that he was going to be at Central Michigan in November 2020, I would say, okay, I don't know about that. There's just so much for him to prove. This is a huge year for Foster at MSU right now. So between that and then Rocket Watts, who's kind of a combo guard, you need options. So I think it's a pretty logical move. And there's very few other kind of gaping spots where you say, oh my God, they're leaving this big hole in this other spot.
Yeah, and I think really just looking at the positions in that sense of he's a point guard, he's not a point guard, it's just a little old-fashioned at this point.
Uh-huh.
What you need are playmakers, you need ball screen creators, and there's literally no reason you can't have two of those on the floor at any time, 3, 4, however many, right? Like, it's a guards game in college basketball. Both guys can play out of ball screens. I guess Terry's maybe a little more limited in terms of where you can play him just because he's so small. Like, you can't really play two Jalen Terrys just because he's
right.
sub 6 foot and skinny. But Hoggard has all the numbers to think that he could really play that secondary creator role off the ball. He has good catch and shoot numbers in the EYBL on Synergy. He has good off the dribble shooting numbers. He can play out of ball screens. I think it's kind of a perfect fit, really, in terms of building a class. Like, you want multi-dimensional players at every spot, and just because everyone thinks they're a point guard doesn't mean you can't play them together. If you can convince them that they can play together, that's exactly what you want to do at this point, right?
Yeah, and Hoggard doesn't think of himself, I think, he thinks of himself as a point guard, but he probably doesn't think of himself as the ultra traditional point guard. He described himself to me as an aggressive driver and distributor. And, like I said, he has size. He's 6'3", probably 185, 90, somewhere in there, maybe more than that. And kind of like a craftier point guard, whereas I think Terry's just kind of put his head down and run past you. But it'll be very interesting to see how they both fit in. But I don't think I'm not throwing any flags in the play that they're bringing in two guys in this class like that.
Yeah, I would say it's a positive, not a negative.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if it's what I find just as interesting is that they basically, they can oversign by one, but this one, by taking on Hoggard now, that fills this class. They're at 13 scholarships, barring, any departures, which obviously they might have, but Michigan State typically does not oversign. So, what does that mean for right now? I don't know if they add anyone right now. Do they sit on that? Wait until the spring? Quite possibly. So I kind of find, in terms of class construction, that's the bigger question that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to complain signing 3 4-star kids in November and say, move on. We're going to go all in on 2021, and we're going to have a little flexibility in the spring when all these guys are coming open and available, right? I mean, if you are handicapping yourself to the point where you don't have any flexibility in the spring, you're creating a disadvantage. Just look at Michigan State this year with Hauser, right? Like, you need that flexibility in the spring. I mean, having your business taken care of at this point in the recruiting cycle is a good spot to be in, I would say.
Right, and if you look at if you look at the 7 scholarship players they'll have next year that will be first and second year guys. So that's Rocket Watts, Malik Hall, Julius Marble. I'm including Joey Hauser in this. And then Jalen Terry, Matty Sissoko, and AJ Hoggard. You could field, all 5 positions with that group. Like, you're ready to roll with that, even if there is mass departures or something crazy happens. You know what I mean?
And yeah, it's interesting though, because it could be a big turnover class in the sense of, depending on what happens this year, a lot of these guys might not even play major minutes this year and then be thrown into a much bigger role depending on how the chips fall, right? Obviously, it depends on early attrition and whatnot, but
yeah, especially if you're talking Hauser sits out, I think Julius Marble could be a redshirt candidate, maybe. That was kind of floated over there this summer. Now, if he's crushing it in preseason workouts, obviously that would change, but it could potentially be a conversation, is my point. And then, yeah, I mean, I certainly see Malik Hall and Rocket Watts playing this year. But, yeah, I think you're right, because if you look at next year's group, you obviously lose Arns, Langford, Winston. You could lose Henry. You could lose Tillman. Like, it could be kind of a titanic change. So, all right, next question.
Next question. Do teams get better by keeping the group together and gaining an extra year of experience, or by bringing in better talent? It seems like there are a few teams, Illinois most notably, being forecasted as showing extreme improvements with basically the same roster.
What do you take this one first? I'm curious to hear you.
So I think one of the most tried and true issues with preseason college basketball projections is that we always take the team that was not particularly good last year but brings everyone back and just assumes that they're going to take a big jump. I look at a team like Seton Hall this year, right? They weren't particularly good last year. They bring everyone back. Now all of a sudden they're going to take a team that was like a top 50-ish team to a top 20-ish team. I think you need some kind of a change to actually get to that level of improvement. I do think you see it more with maybe teams that weren't very good, have more room to improve just by running it back. But I think that it's a key point that you need to bring in some new pieces rather than just running back the same team. And I think that having a balance of that is really what kind of takes you to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, a bad team that comes back, I agree with you. A bad team that comes back is kind of, it might just be a bad team. When I first heard this question, I thought of it at the national level. And when you talk about like competing for national championships, yeah, I want the team that's coming back and is older and has been there, has maybe played in the NCAA tournament, as opposed to your one and done conglomeration of superstars and NBA players that are your decent chance you have a shitty day in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight, and none of those guys have been there, and everyone, kind of eats it right there on the spot, and you have a team that's more than good enough to win a title, but ultimately it's Villanova and Virginia.
Yeah, I'm more
and North
talking
Carolina.
about the team that wins the NIT and brings everyone back.
Right.
More often than not, they're closer to an NIT team the next year than a Sweet 16 team. And they're almost always projected as a Sweet 16 team just because of roster continuity. And I think if you don't shift, like Michigan State's a great example of this. I think if you just ran Michigan State back this year from last year's team, it would be a bit stale. They might not like hit on all cylinders. I think the fact that they're bringing in new pieces, potentially more talented pieces, kind of will help them move forward as a team. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
I think it just gets a little stale when you just run back the exact same thing year after year. Even if you just won the NIT, like it feels like there's all this momentum. Mm-hmm. Those teams never seem to do it for me.
Yeah, especially you need some kind of new inflection of something, whether it's a freshman, whether it's a guy who didn't play the year before who gives you something completely different. But if it's just the same thing, like with Illinois, I find it interesting that they're adding Kobe Cockburn to that lineup from last year. Like, that's a totally new thing, totally new dimension. They were lacking front court depth badly last year. This kind of, is a huge check mark for them. And then if guys like Frazier or whatever take a step forward and kind of, turn into what, every Illinois fan just wants them to be, that could kind of change the dimensions of last year's team. Illinois, in a lot of ways, for as excited as we all got about them when they were on that win streak, I mean, there were just so many flaws. And defensively, how a group can take a step forward when it's basically the same group is maybe a matter of coaching more than personnel.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Illinois is not really the best example of the phenomenon the question is really outlining to begin with. All right, I like this next one, though. Let's get into this. In your recent article shadowing Juwan Howard at Media Day, you nonchalantly mentioned that Beeline approached Howard about coming on staff as head coach in waiting. Can you discuss this more? Any chance Howard regrets not doing that since he might be in a better spot, for example, recruiting?
I got zero sense of regret, first of all.
I would say there'd be no chance there'd be any regret considering he did not spend the last 5 years recruiting and he got the job anyways. Yes. So I'm not sure that regret is the right word, but it is an interesting dynamic, I guess.
Agreed. So, all right. So for anyone who might not have read it, I don't know why they wouldn't have, but Any tried and true athletic subscriber, I hope, checked it out. It was an interesting part of the story. I didn't want to overblow it, but I definitely thought it was really interesting. But as the story goes, in 2016, when Jeff Meyer left the staff and went with LaVall Jordan to Butler, there was the opening. According to Juwan, at that time, Beilein called him and kicked the tires on him. And I'm pretty sure Juwan's name was even floated as like a possible guy that Michigan would approach for it. It made perfect sense. But Beilein apparently reached out to Juwan Howard and kind of said, hey, what do you think about this? Maybe this could be a scenario where you come in, you're kind of a head coach in waiting type spot. And Beilein said to Juwan, and I know I'm asking you for a massive pay cut and a big change in life and blah, blah, blah. And ultimately Howard obviously declined. And the irony being Beilein then hires Sadi Washington. Sadi Washington is now the lone holdover from that staff. And regardless of the facts, Juwan Howard got the job anyway. So definitely thought it was interesting. Is there any regret there? No. Like Juwan kind of just told me the story in passing, kind of just as a, isn't this interesting type deal. Not as, we were kind of talking about all the different connections that he has in the basketball world and all this, because me shadowing him, I just saw like every person I went up to him and had this anecdote of either 6 degrees of separation or I met you this time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Fred Hoiberg also offered him a job.
Yes,
when
exactly.
he was at Chicago. Like,
it was just one after another after another. So I'm in the hallway and I'm like, you just have a connection to everyone. Like, this is crazy to watch. And that's when he told me that Sadi story. So, yeah, I don't know how much there is to draw from it. If you would wonder in a different, alternate universe, what would have happened, maybe he wouldn't have gotten the job in the end. You have no idea. Would he have had a little head start on this? Sure, but I don't know. Did it stand out to you in any way?
Well, I would think about it this way. If he took the job, even if he was so-called promised a coach in waiting spot, would he have had a better or worse shot at actually getting the job when John Beilein packed up and left in May? I would say probably a worse shot. Like, the way Beilein left, he wasn't leaving a coach in waiting. I think that's pretty clear. Right? I mean, it just would be interesting how that all plays out considering the circumstances. It wasn't really the situation where a coach in waiting comes to be when the head coach just disappears on a Monday.
And everything would have been different because, say they did bring in Juwan Howard that time in 2016. In the next round of hires, I imagine Sadi would have gotten the job over either Luke Yaklich or DeAndre Haynes. Now
we're going way down the.
I'm just saying everything.
Hole here.
Like everything has like a cause and effect. But yeah, it's interesting.
3 years from now, what current Michigan State and Michigan assistants are head coaches?
3 years from now.
2022.
2022. I will say Dane Fife.
Fife is a lock, I would say.
Number one pick there. I think Sadi Washington gets a job by then. But
I think so.
So much depends on what happens right now. Like Sadi Washington was a viable candidate coming out of last year, right? If this thing goes sideways in the next 3 years, like I don't know if Sadi Washington has built up enough of a profile to withstand, right? To withstand something going bad here. So
I think Sadi though.
I would think so. DJ Stevens I can't believe he hasn't gotten a job yet. So
that's the one I can't really figure out. Like, if it hasn't happened, is it going to happen? Sort of deal, right?
That's a tough one with him. The wild card here would be BC opening up and Howard Isley.
Yeah, I would put Isley on the list.
Yeah,
BC is going to open up. So if I don't know how much time Howard Isley would have to showcase his coaching ability or whatnot, but you have to think that that's in the pipeline, and that program is not really going anywhere. So I would certainly look at that one.
Yeah, and then,
Phil Martelli?
Yeah, Phil is the interesting one here, because what job would he be interested in if it were to fill up? Like, could he get a low-level, high major? I don't think so, right? Like, I just don't see that happening. So, like, if you look at some decent mid-major jobs that could open up, like, what would he be willing to take? Would he need to move back east? Like, are we only really talking about that little mid-Atlantic corridor, essentially, from, Boston,
which is
down
obviously
to
the most important area on the map for you, right?
Well, obviously.
So there's a
I
lot
would
of jobs
curious
there too.
if, like, a job like Drexel opened up, which is not out of the realm of possibility. What would his interest be? What would their interest be? I don't know. Another A10 job. I think the only one that's really untouchable is Fordham. But if you look across it, like if Richmond opened up, I think he would possibly be an interesting candidate there.
How old is Martelli? If you're an A10, like, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. What's your game? If you're an A10 school, what is your 5-10 year plan for your program making that higher? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, he's 60. He's 65, and I think he's like the second all-time winningest coach in the conference. And it's if he's the guy sitting there and active and an assistant coach at Michigan and say they make the NCAA tournament, is it that crazy of a move? I don't think so. I mean,
I don't think it's crazy.
You're some
I'm just
middling
curious
A10 program. It's, who else are you hiring?
Yeah. So get those assistant coaching hot boards ready for Michigan. We got all 3 coaches on the list here. But no, I do think it's funny to say that and then turn around and say there's so many questions with kind of how Michigan's staff comes together when we're saying all 3 could also be head coaching candidates in the next 3 years. Yeah. How many other Big Ten schools are you going to say that 3 coaches on the bench are head coaching candidates, right? It's just a weird back and forth with just how unique this staff really is, I think.
Right. I agree. All right, you want me to take the next one here? My
sure.
Freaking group
you have the
text
doc open?
Killing me.
I'll just throw it out there. You're struggling over here. What is Gabe Brown's role for Michigan State this year?
I will say back up minutes at the 2 and the 4.
See ball, catch ball, shoot ball. I do think I'm really intrigued by him playing the 4, given that I heard Tom Izzo mention it a little bit at Media Day, and it really fits in with, I think, how you make the best offense around Cassius Winston. If you have a guy who can just shoot the lights out at that spot, I think you're really versatile. We were talking about this a little bit, and you said what a great rebounder he is. So it really seems like he could work in that spot. But yeah, I mean, just get him on the court and let him shoot threes, right? I think that's about what it comes down to this year for him.
Yeah, I think you'll also see a little bit more from him than just catch and shoot. He is, I think his game is much more expansive beyond that. That's all he really needed to do last year. That's really all he was ready to do last year. But his skill set wise, I think he's much more. So I'll be curious to see. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see him, every once in a while, maybe put the ball on the floor and do something. Or I think he'll be much better in transition as opposed to just kind of default running to the wing and just begging for, an open 3. I wouldn't be surprised if you see him just catch it, take 2 big gazelle strides and, dunk the hell out of it. He's more than, I don't know if people understand how good of an athlete he is. He is explosive. He should be an above the rebound shot blocker and rebounder. And I think you'll start to see kind of flashes of that this year.
All right. Who lands more McDonald's All-Americans in the next 5 years? Tom Izzo or Juwan Howard?
operating under the assumption that both are at their respective spots for the next 5 years.
I mean, I feel like that goes into the math potentially, right?
Mm-hmm. So in the last 5 years, Michigan State has signed 3. Does that sound right to you? Langford, Bridges, Jaren Jackson?
That sounds right to me. Watts? Was Watts?
No.
Yeah, Trace was the only one this year.
I will say, I'll go on a limb, and I'm going to say Juwan Howard.
I'm going Juwan Howard for the simple fact that he's recruiting a lot more McDonald's All-Americans.
Good point.
If you recruit enough, you're going to be in more of those situations, right? Whereas, like you look at this Michigan State class, which I think is closer to what Michigan State wants to do, and it's really kind of in that 30 to 80 range for the most part, right? So I don't know that. I think Michigan State's been burned enough that I don't think they're going to ever prioritize like 3-4 of those guys in one class and be left kind of empty-handed at the end.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what we saw Beeline move to. I guess the only caveat would be if they get rid of one and done, do we even have McDonald's All-Americans coming to college anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
so
that's a different conversation. My thinking goes back to a conversation we had previously on this, which is if Howard gets 1, he gets 2 or 3 at a time. I think they come in packages.
Yeah, at this point, it's pretty clear that Juwan Howard's plan for his program is to recruit McDonald's All-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's coaching at Michigan in 5 years and doesn't have few McDonald's All-Americans signed, I don't know if he's coaching in 5 years.
Right.
So that's kind of the math there, I guess. You want to read one, or am I just sticking with it?
I don't even know where you are on the
I'm
list.
just hosting.
You're the host with
right.
the most.
On both Michigan and Michigan State, what player would you predict to exceed individual expectations, and what player would you predict to underwhelm?
Good question. I'm thinking Michigan State first here.
Let's do Michigan State first.
Underwhelming. If I had to bet, and it's partially based on the hype, I would say most likely is Aaron Henry.
I was going to say Aaron Henry. The hype has gone too far for Aaron Henry, but I think so. He's almost like it's not really his fault,
right? Exactly.
But there's this idea that Aaron Henry is this player that he hadn't quite demonstrated, so there's a better chance that he doesn't show that this year.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a dude who averaged 2.5 made baskets a game last year.
Yeah, and it's hard though. Like he was so good in the NCAA tournament and late in the year. You see him turn that corner, so to speak. We have to see it day to day throughout November, December, January, and see if he can produce at that level. I think he can, but I think if you're just betting based on what people are saying he probably is that guy. I would say the most likely to exceed expectations would be Rocket Watts.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a chance he's a really key part of this team, and I think there's more opportunity than people are kind of giving him to make an impact.
I'll buy that. I like that pick. If I had to pick one of my own just for shits and gigs, I'd go with Gabe Brown. He's kind of just a forgotten man there, and he just seems like a guy who, every 4 games could just have, great nights that are huge difference makers. I'm not saying day in, day out. There's just too many bodies out there, but he's just a guy who I could see kind of having his moment every few games.
Think about Gabe Brown where would you rank him in the rotation? Like
eighth, in terms of
7th? What? Just like if you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, like
playing time?
In terms of what role he is, yeah, playing time. He's like your 7th guy, and he can go for 20 on any given night.
Right.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
That's not you're not supposed to have a guy who's literally capable of scoring 20 points on any given night as off the scouting report, basically.
Right. And Kyle Lawrence will play minutes ahead of him on a regular basis.
Yeah, and all of a sudden Gabe Brown will go for 25 and everyone will say, what is going on here? That's just I like that as an X factor in really any game. And you have to prepare for that.
Yes.
All right, you have your Michigan State schedule already. Which
Oh,
game
wait.
is
We
Michigan?
have to pick Michigan players.
Oh, we didn't do Michigan.
Yes.
Most likely to exceed expectations for Michigan, I'm going with Xavier Simpson.
To exceed.
I think his expectations are lower everywhere else than they should be. I think he has a better chance. Like, I think he can be all Big Ten guy, and I don't think anyone really picked him at that. Maybe that's a low exceeding, but who would you say? I mean, I guess you could say anyone else on the roster because there's zero expectations for 5 through 10.
See, I would go Livers in the same, with basically the same rationale that you have, in that I think there's a chance that he comes out and is suddenly just doing things that we haven't seen him do and looks more and more like a guy who does have real legitimate pro potential and is an all-league type guy, when people just kind of said, oh, he's, just maybe their top return. But, I mean, most people are predicting him to be their leading scorer, so I don't know how much that counts.
I was putting Livers in the other category.
You're putting him in the other category.
He's my most likely to underwhelm expectations.
Interesting.
So it's a big disagreement point. I think he just hasn't shown all of these things that people are assuming he's going to be very good at. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of ground to make up. He needs to prove that he can dribble. He needs to prove that he can defend wings. He needs to really show any sort of new dimension to his game, and he hasn't shown that yet. I think there's a chance that he struggles to show some of this stuff, especially early, and could not quite be, like, people are saying he's going to be this. He could still score a lot of points, but I just think that there's a lot of leaps of faith as far as that he'll just add all these things to his game seamlessly.
Fair. I would say Brandon Johns.
That's fair.
There's definitely a chance that the old, you are who we thought you were based on last year's, if that, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that spills over into this year and it just doesn't happen yet. I wouldn't write him off, but it's a big ask for him to go from nothing last year to contributing, let alone playing this year.
Yep. I would add Colin Castleton as a potential exceeds.
Me too.
In the same sense that if Johns is the disappoints, Castleton probably could step into that exceeds role.
I'll buy it.
All right. What game is Michigan State's first loss? How many losses do they have when 2020 begins? And what are their chances to be undefeated at the new year?
I will
Got
say...
your Bart Torvik up here?
I do not. I will say first loss is...
Kentucky?
No. Definitely not. I think there's a better chance of them losing the Seton Hall game than there is the Kentucky game.
I'm off Seton Hall.
Okay.
Michigan State by double digits at Seton Hall. Book it.
Okay. What about a potential Maui championship game against Kansas?
That's probably. So who would I don't know the second round in Maui.
Dayton or Georgia?
Ant-Man. I think Maui championship.
I think they're winning the Maui this year. Yes, me too.
Well, no, I think the most likely losses are Kentucky or that Kansas game.
Okay. The other teams, so in the first round they have Virginia Tech. That's a W. Then Dayton or Georgia. That's a W. The other side of the bracket is Kansas, BYU, Chaminade, and this is off the top of my head, UCLA.
All right, so it's going to be Michigan State, Kansas, I think.
I would certainly think so.
Pretty safe to assume.
What about Duke at home?
No.
I don't think so either, but, you're talking about a guy who went forever without beating Duke, and now you're asking him to beat them back-to-back years?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the only road game.
I mean, Breslin is going to be an absolute snake pit that night.
The only road games are Seton Hall and Northwestern before the new year.
Right.
So if you think that they can beat Kentucky and Kansas on a neutral, I think that, I mean, I don't see, they're not going to lose.
Do you want my real answer?
Yeah.
January 12th at Purdue.
Okay. You don't, I could see them losing an early game, but I don't think it's impossible.
It's either Seton Hall or they're going to January 12th. That's it right there.
Why Seton Hall?
It's a road game.
Okay. Not
now that
Northwestern.
said, there's going to be 30% Michigan State fans because the game, it's not like an on-campus game at Seton Hall. It's at Prudential Center or whatever the hell that thing is called in the Meadowlands. There will be. That's going to be a big game for them. That's going to be a big game for Seton Hall.
Seton Hall finished last year?
What do you mean?
What do you think they finished with their record? 20-14, 9-9 in the Big East,
okay.
65th overall on Bart Torvik.
Okay.
You think running that back is just going to make them a top 20 team?
No, I think it's really hard to win games on the road.
Yeah. I think they have a far greater chance of losing to Kentucky than Seton Hall.
They're not losing to Kentucky. I think there's a better chance they run Kentucky than there is that they lose to them.
There's certainly a chance they run Kentucky, but I don't think... Where are those games this year? New York?
Yes.
Okay, we'll see.
The last time they played Kentucky in New York, they got run the opposite way.
Yeah, I was there.
Dusted.
All right. So, percent chance they're undefeated at the new year. You're saying better than
I'll say
you picked it, so
65%,
got to be high.
65% chance.
All right. That early January is really the perfect time. It's when undefeated teams lose. That's about when Michigan lost too, I think, this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Michigan State's schedule is tough. I wouldn't say it's the toughest schedule ever, though, right? So it's hard. It's crazy to say that when they play, they'll probably play Kansas,
right,
Kentucky, and Duke. And
they're not. I'll tell you, they're not making it to February. No chance. Because their road game after Purdue is at Indiana. They're not going the Indiana-Purdue back-to-back road trips unscathed. Especially since they randomly can't beat Indiana. Or just play like absolute shit against them every year.
I'm changing my answer. Kansas. Maui championship game. Run out of gas.
You think Tom Izzo is going to lose to Bill Self under the current circumstances in the Maui championship?
How many athletic department staffers making six figures does it take to realize that acrobatic dancers for a Midnight Madness performance might be a bad decision?
That was incredible.
Apparently I need a few more.
How is that possible? And that apology, I'm sorry if you were offended, that was the best. That was the best part. I'm sorry if you feel that way.
Oh, boy. All right. Is David DeJulius not a solid option for minutes at the 2? Seems like last season he had spurts and definitely seems like a scoring threat, but you don't hear much about him playing the 2.
Who's he defending is my question.
Yeah, well...
He is little. He's
strong.
He's strong as hell, but you have him out there with Xavier Simpson. Those are two small dudes. And has David Julius proven to be able to guard a point guard, let alone a shooting guard?
Well, my question is on the assumption that he showed scoring flashes last year when he made 6 out of 30 shots. He needs to prove that he can make shots, and if he can, he'll play. I do think he'll play minutes at the 2 because Michigan's fighting against an issue where the entire lineup is going to be too big. They need some sort of small players out there to guard.
I think you're operating.
Other guards.
I think you're operating with the beeline side of your brain, where you think that someone who can score and not defend is going to get minutes on this team. I don't think that's happening.
Here's my case. Look at everyone Michigan's recruiting at the 2 and everyone can do something with the ball. Everyone can create their own shot, and everyone plays downhill.
Do they have size? Or are they athletic defenders?
All right, so who's your answer at the 2?
We've gone through this a million times. I mean, you're looking at Franz. Nunez will get a look. Eli. Eli could start at the 2. You know that.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's the Julius, Eli, Franz, right? That's your group. I don't think it's impossible that the Julius could outplay Eli. It's not like Eli's some 6'5" athletic freak who's locking everyone down.
I agree. He's a better defender than David. At least that's what he showed last year.
For sure he showed that last year. I mean, if I was operating under the assumption that Beeline was still here, I would say Eli's the obvious answer because I think Beeline would trust Eli with his life savings. But I don't know. I think that Julius will clearly be in the mix at the 2 because he's not playing more than 5 minutes a game backing up the point guard.
Well, I mean, put it this way: if he's shooting at a exceedingly high clip, that's the route that I see that happening. And he can shoot. I mean, he can shoot the ball. Like,
who's the second best ball handler on Michigan's roster?
I'd say it's a toss-up between David and Eli. I don't know.
Exactly. So, and Eli, you would not say is a strong ball handler.
No.
So if you need someone else that can do anything with the ball, the Julius is a great candidate. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
He's got to show a lot of improvement and transform his game.
But he needs to be making threes.
Well, yeah.
Like if he's out there with Xavier, and he's not a threat to put it in someone's
out there
eye.
Needs to be making threes.
Right.
I agree. No one's proven they
David
can.
Julius went 1 for 15 on threes last year.
I realize that.
This is what I mean. So
and Eli Brooks' career in the 20% too. So I mean, it's not like you have a lock answer. I don't think DeJulius should be discounted to be in the mix fighting for that spot. I think it's wide open.
I'm not saying there's no chance. I'm just saying he needs to prove that he can defend someone on the other end if it's any kind of mismatch. Now, could there be instances where another team goes small and you just put Xavier on whoever the best offensive player is, and maybe DeJulius is on the ball? That's certainly reasonable. It's not like a lot of teams that they're rolling out against are starting a 6'5" or 6'6" shooting guard either. So, if they're playing smaller teams, then yeah, certainly. But he's like he and Johns, I think, are just the perfect examples of guys who, if you're Michigan, you're just hoping that the whole coaching change is just an entire page flip in disposition, in confidence, in the way you think about the game. Because both of those guys, they'd get on the court and they were just looking at the bench waiting to get pulled. They're guys who are very naturally talented. You need to just kind of go and play ball, it seems like.
Yep. Next up.
You're doing a hell of a job here hosting, by the way, man.
Why was Cassius not a Michigan State captain at the beginning of last year? Second part, what is your best guess for where he's drafted?
Let's pull up. I'm trying to remember who were the captains last year. I believe it was McQuaid, Goins, Langford. I think that's right. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But I don't know. I think it was a player's vote. And Cassius was never the most vocal, like, in the clubhouse type guy. For as mature as he is and the way that he deals with, like, the media and stuff, like, I wonder how he was before last year, kind of internally, in terms of kind of taking that step forward and maybe speaking over people or kind of commanding presence. McQuaid and Goins obviously had age. They've both been through a lot. super highly respected and all that stuff, and then Langford is kind of like this, very very wise guy who everyone looks to, and he's deeply religious and kind of talks at a very serious place with people and stuff like that. And then Cassius, so I'm sure he got a few votes, I would imagine, but it just didn't happen. I don't know. Is this a Connor Cook controversy?
What? I don't know anything about Connor Cook, but
remember he wasn't voted captain and everyone lost their shit like his senior year. But I think that was when he was like a senior quarterback or something. I don't know. Who cares? We don't pay attention to that. So
no, it's the wrong color surface. I don't know what's going on in the. I have a take on the second part of where he gets drafted. I think he ends up getting drafted higher than anyone expects. I think it's too obvious what he can do. And I think you look at it and you translate it to the NBA, and it translates. And there's a role for him as kind of a ideal backup point guard in the NBA. I could see him going like early second round,
25 to 35.
Yeah, that's like I think he sneaks in there, and I think some team is smart enough to realize, well, if this guy is just unguardable in college basketball, maybe there's a chance he can actually play basketball pretty well, and we should think about the fact that we shouldn't just exclude him because he's kind of short and not very athletic.
Like Jalen Brunson, Frank Mason, late first, early second.
And if he's the National Player of the Year, he's going to get more of those looks just because you can't miss the guy. He's right there in front of you.
Right.
I think it's crazy.
And I think this year his 3-point percentage goes up, as we've talked about, and his turnovers go down. So he'll even be that much more attractive. And if he has a healthy knee.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. If he's healthy the whole season.
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty damn good last year. What's he going to be this year? All right. Who are your top 3 guard and top 3 big defensive players in the conference? Rank them, please.
Okay. So we looked at this one before we started recording, and we both filled out or jotted down our answers on the spot without consulting with each other. So this is the big reveal between the two of us. You want to go bigs first?
Let's do bigs first.
All right. You want me to go?
I'll go first. I've got Teskey at 1.
Okay.
Tillman at 2.
Okay.
Arms at 3.
All right. We're flipping Tillman and Teskey.
Okay. I
just like Tillman away from the basket. I just think there's such
You have Harms at 3?
Yeah, I have Harms at 3. I think there's such a premium on being able to switch screens and read screens and drop back, do all these things. I just think Tillman moves so well, and his spatial awareness is off the charts and all that stuff, and he's just really, really good. But it's a coin flip.
I think it's close between both of those guys at the top, and I like both. I think they're both more switchable and versatile than Matt Harms is. Yeah, I think they both are a little more modern defensively than Harms, who's more of kind of just a traditional rim protector.
Yeah, and Harms, like, to his credit, he makes game-changing defensive plays almost regularly. Like, he always just comes. He's one of those. He just always comes up with like a huge block or something with like 3 minutes left in a game, right on a possession where like the other team has to have it. He just does that shit all the time. He's diving on the floor, blocking shots, just making plays. All right, guards. You want me to go first?
You just start with the guards.
We both had trouble with our third one, which I think means that we might be identical before that. I took Xavier Simpson, 1.
I have Simpson first.
No Gel Eastern, 2.
Yeah, I was thinking about bumping my number 3 up above No Gel, but
whoa.
Who do you have 3?
Brad Davison.
Oh, jeez. That's who you have?
Yeah.
For taking charges?
Yeah.
What on earth is that crap? I have Jamari Wheeler.
Okay.
One of the best steal guys in the league, and I think he did it last year, and Reeves took all the kind of publicity because he was really good at that too. I think Wheeler will be a lockdown guy this year. I think he forces turnovers as well as anyone in the league.
There is something to be said for annoying the shit out of people you play as a defender.
Yeah, you don't go on my list for all those petty flops. It's a flop. How many flops are No Gel Eastern, Xavier Simpson, and Jamari Wheeler taking?
They're all different defensive players.
None of them are taking flops left and right.
Well,
might be throwing hands if someone does take a flop on them. I'll take my team against your team any day. The second part of this question was about a starting lineup and picking our favorite kind of too deep from the conference. I think you wanted to tease a coming episode of the pod for this.
Yes. Yeah, we will be conducting a draft of Big Ten players. Myself, Dylan, and 3 special guests will be holding a draft very shortly here. I think we're each picking 8 players, and I think it'll be a very interesting power rank of players in the league by how they go. And we're drafting on production this year, so it's not pro potential, it's not hype, it is only expectations for production this season.
Yep.
So
coming soon. That's the content you all need.
Subscribe to the Moving Screen Pod.
All right, we have an Illinois question again.
What is going on?
I think Graham Couch has just infiltrated half of our listeners. With such a consensus among people who know the Big Ten that Illinois should finish among the top 6. First of all, I think they were picked 7th in the poll, so I don't know if that's a consensus. Why are they vastly underrated on a national level, with people like Lunardi still not projecting them anywhere near making the NCAA tournament this year? I think, first of all, we have to say they're not – I wouldn't say there's a consensus on Illinois. I think there are a lot of people who like them. A lot of people who I think know Big Ten basketball who like them. I like them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's crazy to think that they're still kind of a fringe team on the national radar.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Where did I have them? I had them 6th in my poll. I mean, I don't know what kind of respect you're looking for Illinois. I mean, we rattled off the numbers the last time. They lost a school record 21 games last year and had the 4th lowest win percentage in program history in the Big Ten. It will be a significant development for them to go and be a top 6 team.
When the first digit in the loss column last year is a 2, that's not good.
It's not great. Not great. And when the first of 2 digits in your defensive efficiency is 1, not great. So
not great.
Look, we've talked about how fascinating Illinois is. They were picked as high as 2 in the polls. Shout out Graham Couch. They were picked as low as 9. And that's kind of what Illinois is. Like, they haven't done anything in a very long time in this league. So you're talking about a bit of a leap of faith in them contending for a top 5 spot, let alone being ranked in the top 25 or being a shoo-in for the NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah, it would be a big season if they.
I think I said
NCAA
11
tournament.
seed when you asked me the last episode.
Yeah, so if it's an 11 seed to
baby.
Who see them all the time, what is the national? I mean, they're just not quite on that national radar.
Right.
We'll see if they get there. All right, now that Beeline is out of the Big Ten, who is the best offensive mind?
I mean, I think it's certainly a toss-up right now between Izzo and Matt Painter. Uh-oh. We got the dog barking in the background there for Dylan, so he's on mute. I think this is a pretty hard question. I mean, look, Tom Izzo's success speaks for itself. I would lean Izzo partially because of what last year was. I thought last year was one of his best coaching jobs, the way that they evolved over the course of the year to their personnel. I thought kind of snapped some narratives that have kind of trailed Izzo around of running a maybe a little bit of a dated system that everyone kind of, they ran the shit out of it, and they had really good players, and they were tough as hell, so they would always just get buckets and could score and score and score, and they played fast. But I think before last year, there was definitely some kind of chatter around, is this kind of getting a little tired for Michigan State. Last year, anything but. It was one of his best coaching jobs. It showed in the end. And then Matt Painter, I mean, the numbers don't lie when it comes to efficiency.
Yeah, I would lean Matt Painter just because I kind of am fascinated by how he has adjusted and transformed his offense in different ways. I mean, it's a toss-up between both. I just like how Purdue has kind of reinvented itself in different ways. But you can argue that Michigan State basically reinvented itself last year in a way that no one really saw coming. I mean, if you were to watch their offense possession by possession last year compared to 5 years ago, it'd be worlds different, and Izzo deserves a lot of credit for that. So I'd go Painter, but I don't think you can go wrong with either. And number 3, I don't even like Hoiberg, right? He coached a Big Ten game yet. There's not a lot of offensive geniuses in the league. Like,
this is
go ahead.
So Michigan State has had a top 15 adjusted offense in 4 of the last 5 years. They were as high as 2 in 2016 and 5 in 2019. In that same span, Matt Painter has had 4 top 25 adjusted offense. The numbers are damn near identical. They're just 2 great coaches. Like Purdue was as high as 2 as well in 2018 and finished 4th in 2019. I mean, you're talking Hall of Fame caliber coaches. Like Matt Painter, how old's Matt? Late 40s? Is he 50 yet? I don't think so. Let's see. He's 49 years old.
Got it.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who is in the middle stages of what will likely be a Hall of Fame coaching career.
And if you think, I mean, what was it, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
People weren't real keen on Matt Painter and West Lafayette. Like, there is some dicey couple of years there where he had to really kind of reinvent his program.
2012 to 2014, they went 10-8, 8-10, 5-13 in the league.
And then bounced back. Those are clearly kind of the class of the league as far as coaching goes, but you are seeing a new generation coming in now, so we'll see how that plays out.
And that's like major props to Purdue. I'm not sure who would have been the athletic director at that time. That 2015, I imagine 2014. I imagine it's the same guy now. And I'm not sure. I have no idea. But take some balls sometime. Sometimes it takes bigger balls to not fire the coach than it does to fire the coach.
That's true. It's easy to just kind of say, all right, well, we'll just do something else, and you can completely miss the mark.
They would have what? They would have hired Konzo Martin and been who knows where. Probably not where they are right now.
Probably not. I'm going to go ahead and say they might be on probation.
Easy. Just taking shots at the man. He hasn't gotten any programs on probation.
Okay.
He hasn't.
Next question. Can you set the stage for Isaiah Todd's announcement on the 17th? Any background info you have on his recruitment thus far? Seems like he has the potential to be a recruiting domino for Howard. So, background, Isaiah Todd announced the final 2 today of Michigan and Kansas. He visited Kansas over the weekend. He visited Michigan the week before. So there have also been rumors kind of tied to him throughout the last few months that he could look into playing overseas instead of going to college. It seems like he clearly plans to commit to a college, but that's going to kind of be floating around there. It's not going to go away, I don't think. He's obviously said no, that's not what he wants to do, but you just never know with these things and how the game has changed.
And there's some chatter that some of the big hitters pulled out because of that. Did you say that?
Yeah, Kentucky did not want him to come on an official visit, which is telling about how well they're recruiting. I mean, they have other guys in his position. If you can turn down the number 12 kid in the country for an official visit, you're doing something. But so there's been a little sort of mystery around his recruitment and why his list is what it is. But he's certainly he used to be more of a top 5, top 7 player in the class. He dropped a little bit, but he is a 6'10" combo forward, freak athlete, 7-foot wingspan, can shoot a little bit. I mean, he's about as blue chip as it gets for a 5-star to land at this point, right? So could be a potential huge get for Juwan Howard in that regard. And I don't really buy into the domino theory, so to speak. I know Juwan even mentioned it at media day. He said he just needs to get one, and he thinks the rest will come flooding in. So Could it have that impact? I guess, but I still think a lot of these guys make decisions kind of on their own time and their own opinions.
Yeah. There has to be one at some point. Like, this gets into what Juwan Howard was saying at the table the other day, right? And it was really interesting to hear a coach say something like that publicly, where he said, he was talking about the NIL stuff, the name, image, and likeness conversation. And he goes, like, he's basically making this point, like, guys, I'm not giving you the company line. I'm not bullshitting you. Like, I really don't know what is happening in that because my head hasn't stopped spinning. And then he goes, I haven't gotten a commitment yet. And he goes, and then he just kind of turned the conversation sideways and said, if, I'm pretty sure if I get one, then, it's going to be kind of a snowball effect, and that he's out there trying to convince someone to do what he did once upon a time when he was the first member of the Fab Five. So that's his big sales pitch right now to all these, potential McDonald's All-American level guys is you need to be the first one. You need to bet on me and then convince everyone else, and then we're going to get this thing going. Like that. Bet on me by betting on you. That's the sales pitch right now. So that's clearly what Todd is hearing. And, if your first guy is the 12th ranked player in the class, that's your first recruit, is higher than anyone in the previous 12 years under the guy who is maybe the best coach in program history. That would be quite the windfall early on. And it would be immediately paying dividends, right? It would be, this is why Juwan Howard was brought in.
Yeah, and it would I think it would at least guarantee that Michigan would kind of be in these conversations going forward, right? I mean, it would prove kind of that you're a legitimate destination to recruit this kind of talent and that you're building your program that way. So yeah, that will be 10 days from now. Could be a huge first step for Howard and recruiting, and because kind of the conversation over the last 2 months, I mean, whenever I talk about recruiting at all, it's just a wave of, it's only visits. Like, when is Michigan going to actually sign someone? What is this plan? Like, who are the backup options? Like, the thing about recruiting is you only need to get 2 or 3 guys. You can miss on 15, but if you land 2 or 3, you have a great class, right? So that's the approach, and we'll see how it kind of plays out here over the coming weeks.
Agreed. What's your bet? Michigan?
It seems like kind of trending in that direction. I don't know. I think that by all accounts, he had a good visit. His mom seems to be kind of firmly in Michigan's camp, but also you can never bet against Kansas in recruiting, so who knows how it kind of plays out. But
it would be a pretty goddamn baller move to have the shit show that was this past weekend, and then just go sign a 5-star 2 weeks later, just throw up some deuces, and but he played Nike AAU, right?
He did. He played for the Knight Riders Elite this year, which is the same AAU program that Jet Howard plays for at a younger level, which is a nice connection there.
And this is going to be the stuff that I feel like is going to be in all of Michigan's recruits under Juwan Howard is getting out the yarn, right? And putting charting it out on the wall of all the connections and who is how and connected to this guy and that guy and blah blah blah. There's going to be a lot of that.
That's recruiting,
and I feel like for some reason I think it's going to be especially with him. I mean, going from the previous regime to this one, so. I don't know, we'll see.
What else we got here? How are we doing on time here?
An hour and 3 minutes.
At what point in the calendar should I start drawing conclusions about Michigan and Michigan State recruiting? Well, Michigan State recruiting probably right now because their class is basically signed. Michigan recruiting, I kind of look at in 2 parts. I think they're going to be really active in the spring, regardless of what happens these next few weeks. But also, it's a measuring stick to see who you can sign in November when the early signing period takes place.
My audio dropped when you asked it. What was it?
At what point in the calendar should I start drawing conclusions about Michigan and Michigan State recruiting?
Well, Yeah, I mean, Michigan State, I'm not sure.
It's done. You have your conclusion.
They are. And it's going to be the same thing next year, and the same thing after that, and the same thing after that.
You have a fan on or something there?
No, it might be my motor on my computer.
Oh, okay.
But Michigan, I'd be curious to see if given kind of the types of dudes that Howard is looking to dance with, like, how many do they wait for? Do they go, or some of these guys who go into the spring and are juggling, do I go overseas? Do I play ball? Do I wait to find out if there's going to be some rule changes? Like, I think Michigan's going to be right in the mix with all these guys, where they might be the program, and I think they're going to be down with getting into the transfer game and getting some immediate talent in here. I wouldn't draw anything on Michigan until like next June.
Yeah, I think Michigan has to be active in the spring, just because if you want to go after these 5 stars and wait it out, you have to be able to be ready to act on a alternate plan, whether it's like Kansas with Jalen Wilson last year or a transfer, a grad transfer, right? Like, you see a lot of that. So I think if you want to play in this high stakes recruiting pool, you have to be ready to adapt. Like, look at Oregon this year. They've built the whole team from May to August. Reclassifications, transfers, the whole bit there.
And they still, Michigan still has 3 scholarships open for next year. And while there was no is that right? That's right, Dylan, right?
4, I believe. 3 or 4.
3.
Depending on what you do.
Well, Austin Davis is kind of the wild card.
He's the 4th.
Right.
As a redshirt.
And that's with no attrition. And I was surprised that they got through the coaching transition with 0 attrition. I'd be very surprised if they make it through a year without any attrition afterward.
For sure. I think because there's so many open spots, someone's going to win them, someone's going to lose them, and you'll look at a new situation in the spring, without a doubt. All right. Who do you think benefits the least by the coaching change at Michigan?
First answer that comes to mind is Xavier Simpson.
Okay. I can get there because I think Beeline had really kind of catered the whole offense to fit his game.
Everything was built around his exact skill set. Is Juwan Howard going to do that? I have no idea. Maybe. But if you have one of the 5 best offensive coaches in college basketball designing everything to fit exactly what you do, and that's gone, I imagine there could be some residual effect there.
Yeah. I'd go Eli Brooks also. I think he had a lot of chits built up, so to speak, in terms of what he had kind of established at his position. Now he's kind of starting at square one with everyone else. Like Beeline might have had this like impression of what Eli Brooks was. Beeline had an impression of why he didn't play Dave DeJulius. Now they're all starting at the same square. What do you think about John Teskey?
No, I wouldn't go there. I think that him working with Juwan Howard on a daily basis, I just can't imagine there being anything but good stuff for him. And a big man who wants his bigs to be involved and get everything that you can out of it. I always feel like Teskey is the Xavier Simpson in this conversation, where everything was like built around, getting the most out of Simpson last year. I could imagine a scenario where they look to get the most out of John Teskey this year.
I can see that. I feel like Teskey's role last year was also designed pretty well to get the most out of him, but I guess we'll see that because his role could change, but obviously more emphasis, more opportunities. Yeah. It's hard to look at that as a negative unless you aren't cut out to use them.
And you're saying that without, for all we know in the back of John Teskey and his, people's minds, it was, would love to get a post touch or two. I'm 7'2", I tower over everyone. I'm built like a freaking phone booth. No one can move me out of the lane. Maybe throw it up, right?
So I pulled video in a story last week about kind of just previewing the center position. Teskey scored 12 baskets with his back to the basket last year.
Great stat.
9 of them he was switched onto a guard or a wing.
Great stat.
So he scored 3 baskets against another big guy. Like,
but now how
catching
many?
the ball.
But how many? I mean, I don't expect you to have this, but how many touches did he get with his back to the basket against the opposing big?
Yeah, total it's like 30. All right, so
Sure.
he didn't get touches, and the point is, we don't know if he can or can't, but we know that they didn't try to do that.
They
I also
didn't
think
try, right.
so. It's just a complete wild card because it could go in either direction, right? I mean, I think he needs to improve first and foremost, just establishing position to make players pass him the ball. But at the same time, if that was an emphasis, he might actually be good at that, and he wasn't doing it aggressively enough, right?
Right.
Because he wasn't going to get the ball.
And by the way, the real answer to this question is Ward Manuel. You're talking about a dude, talking about an athletic director who just had the luxury of being completely unconcerned with anything happening in that basketball building outside of getting wins. Like, the biggest controversy was him, was the program catching some shit for having underpaid assistant coaches. Like, if that's going to be your big to-do, he was in a really good place as an athletic director, while college basketball is burning down and the FBI is storming the gates and amateur model is being called into question. You happen to have this coach, and Juwan Howard's Ward Manuel's the real answer.
All right. Next question. Izzo demands tough defense. Everyone knows this. Hauser graded out as one of the worst defenders in the Big East last year, yet you keep saying he would plug in as the starting 4 if eligible. Why?
That's a good question. Mainly because what are the other options at the 4? Is Thomas Kithier a all-conference level defender? I really like Thomas Kithier. It's not meant as a shot at him, but you have Thomas Kithier, you have Malik Hall, you have maybe Gabe Brown. What Hauser gives you offensively has to outweigh his defense.
And I would also add that Aaron Henry is going to guard the best player of a 2-3-4 size, regardless, right? So you're not going to be asked to do too much at that spot. And I think with Hauser, if he can shoot it like everyone thinks, you have the potential to be that much better on offense, to the point where maybe you don't have to worry about defense so much. Not that that'll ever happen.
Yeah. But even the 4-5 spot, I think the same thing goes with Xavier Tillman. Xavier Tillman can guard the best 4 and 5, whoever's better between the two opposing bigs. And you just hide. You could hide Hauser on, whatever. If they have some mediocre center, you just stick him on him.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. And it is an interesting point, though, that I didn't think about that much. I just think you look at, he's played high major basketball at a high level, whereas basically every other option has played fairly limited role, right? Like Gabe Brown and Kithier played last year, but not the kind of minutes Hauser played. So that's where I was going, at least in terms of penciling him in that situation. But again,
I would think, I know that the defense is definitely the shot at Hauser. I would think a year older, getting into Michigan State's system, playing for this staff, it will improve slightly. I don't think he's going to be, some lost lamb out there. He has size. He can certainly, he's an athletic guy. He's not some big stiff. He can certainly be better.
All right. Will Michigan shifting to a more post-touch heavy offense make them more inefficient in the long run?
I don't know if I would use the expression post-heavy. I think there will be occasional post-touches. I don't know if I'd go, maybe it's a matter of semantics, but.
Yeah, I think that Michigan's offense is probably going to be less efficient because it lost its 3 top scorers and because John Beilein's not the coach. I think really there's just a level of
up. They're going to play more possessions,
which does not directly have a correlation to your efficiency. That's why you split those apart. But either way, I think the point is if you're just going from John Beilein to anything, you're going to probably have an offensive dip. And I don't think it's it's not a knock on Howard or anything else. It's just kind of the situation and what you were working with under the previous staff.
That's fair.
I don't think it's just because they'll throw the ball in the post more. I think it's related to a number of different things, and we just have to see what it all looks like before we can really know.
I mean,
right,
I was saying, like, play more possessions. I also think like there's a difference between the way that Michigan not only played low possession but valued every possession in such a way. Like, I think it's going to be a little bit more fast and loose with putting up shots, attacking the glass, second chance opportunities, getting out and running. I think the turnovers will probably go up a little bit. It's just not going to be as like neat and tidy of a brand of basketball. I just don't think.
I agree with that. I think some of those things could be how Michigan makes up for perhaps a less efficient first shot offense, so to speak. Right? Like, you might turn it over more, but get more offensive rebounds.
And three-point shooting, right. The three-point shooting is a massive question. But if you're capitalizing on the offensive glass, it at least softens the blow if you're, ranked 200th in the country in three-point shooting.
Yep. All right, how many more of these are we doing? We're running out of a little steam here. Let's see here.
Pick up the juice, man.
Why all the Ohio State love? 1 second or third team all Big Ten player on the roster, and he's a tough player to build a team around. Probably competent at point guard. Some athletes at the wing, but none are at Livers level, and none are McDonald's All-Americans. What needs to happen for Ohio State to be better than Michigan?
Well, I would say I'd say Ohio State has a lot of they have a lot of dudes. It's hard to go through that roster and not see stuff that you like, and that extends all the way down to the coaching staff. So I think it's a bit of a bet on Chris Holtmann. I think they have a number of guys who get a year. They're freshmen who are going up to sophomores. They're sophomores who are going up to juniors. I think can be a lot better. You do have a reliable guy in Caleb Wesson who is at least kind of guaranteed production. But some of it's a gamble. I mean, someone has to be like teams have to win games in this league. And outside of Michigan State, it's a bit of, and probably Maryland, it's a bit of a crapshoot.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point that you don't know exactly how all those pieces are going to fit together and who's going to be in what role, and like there might be some issues there, but there's just so much depth and so many pieces, so many options, more options than probably any other roster that I think you can bet on Holtmann figuring out. I'm getting there with Ohio State. I still don't love them, but I can see the question for sure.
All right, you got any more?
If you could add one player from the Big Ten onto Michigan or Michigan State's team, who would you choose? Well, one for each.
Oh, great question. I wish I had a second to prep for that.
I will go with Lamar Stevens on Michigan.
Okay. You could maybe
at the
go
4.
Lamar Stevens on either, but okay.
You could. He would be a good choice. I could see going with a 2 for Michigan too, but I don't know who I would want to grab. Michigan State. Oof. How about Wieskamp? Just shoot threes.
You put him at the 4?
At the 3 with Henry at the 4.
Yow. That's a good one. I also think Wieskamp would be good on Michigan.
Yeah, and that's why I think Franz Wagner could play a key role. I think their games are similar in a lot of ways in terms of how they play.
Man, what a great question. I want to say I'll put Stevens on Michigan State for sure. Michigan.
Would you add? Let's just start here. Would you add a 2 or a 4 to Michigan's roster?
Probably Wieskamp, so that you can just move everyone around him. Same thing with it you could do with Michigan State. You just slide Livers to the 4.
Yeah. So Wieskamp and Stevens would be the hot free agents if there was a Big Ten free agency.
Most definitely. Well, it's versatility, It's the guys who can play multiple positions and score in multiple ways. That's what you want. You don't want specialization. When you were talking about good teams,
Yep. I completely agree.
Any more?
I think that's enough.
How about the fact that Ao was not picked by either of us, by the way? Ao would be an interesting fit on Michigan.
He would be. That would be a good option to play. I would like him playing next to Simpson. That would be pretty fierce. He can shoot a bit. He probably fits more what Juwan Howard wants out of that spot.
Yep.
I like that. You wouldn't take Georgie and go two bigs in Michigan State and play Georgie and Tillman.
Oh, I love that. I love Georgie anywhere, though. You know that. You're just tugging at my heartstrings now. I'm surprised you didn't just put Reavers on either of them, or both of them, maybe.
No. I'm off Wisconsin. I'm not buying that.
What happened?
No. We're done with that.
You were building that boat to get to the island, weren't you?
No. I'm in on Illinois.
You just love
me and Graham Couch,
Reavers.
Apparently. I just love what?
Reavers.
No. I like him. He's good. I wasn't the one who picked him higher on the Big Ten list. Let me remind you.
You picked him higher than I did.
Okay.
You put him above Georgie, didn't you?
The overall list had him above Georgie, but that wasn't my fault.
That's a mortal sin, not even a cardinal sin.
All right, this podcast has gone on long enough.
Off the rails? No more?
No more.
We're getting good. It's only good when we get silly.
All right, we'll do one more then.
All right, here we go.
Looking back at the first round of last year's draft, Langford getting selected was no one's surprise. Poole was a surprise to many. Give us a name who you think will be a surprise first-round pick in next year's draft from the Big Ten. Wieskamp. I will go with... Oof, it's ugly.
It's a tough league. It's a tough league.
I might just stick to the bit and go with Jerome Hunter.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
He's going to be the freshman of the year.
I figured you were going to go Geo Baker.
No. I could see... I was going to go way down and go with Aaron Wheeler at Purdue.
You love him.
I think you're going off of the... I mean...
Yeah.
Who are we looking at? Oturu?
You got to reach. You go one of the freshmen from either Trace Jackson Davis or one of the Ohio State boys. Maybe your boy C.J. Walker just launches himself to national fame and fortune.
I'm going to go with no.
Okay.
Franz Wagner.
I'll buy it, sure.
He's closer to the NBA radar than a lot of these names we're listing off here.
This is true.
Mike Schmitz flies out to go see him play in Germany.
It's big time.
He doesn't fly out to go see Cam Mack work out in junior college or in Lincoln. So we'll see.
I'm going to say Evan Boudreaux is my final answer. But
oh, God. Man. That was one of the most disappointing preseason hypes of recent history. I was expecting big things from him. He's still there for... Is he a junior or senior this year?
Senior.
So he's...
Former Ivy League Rookie of the Year. We'll see what he has. This is a big year for him.
All right. That's a wrap.
Okay, very good.
Send us home.
Thanks for doing it, buddy. And thanks to all of you for listening. Make sure you check out my other podcast, The Beat, with myself and Nick Baumgartner. We talked.
You have some big plan this week?
We talked some hoops last week, and the week before that, we sat down with Phil Martelli for a long, ranging conversation that was very interesting. And this week, it's a football one, but it's a good guest. I think you will all greatly enjoy it. I can't spill those beans yet, but we're recording that tomorrow, and it'll run on Thursday. So Check that out. Subscribe to Hoops. Subscribe to The Athletic. And, of course, be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.